Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I apologize for the delay because my computer decided to suddenly die. Never a boring moment when it comes to technology, that's for sure. So, I am particularly excited to be here today because I've been wanting to do this stream for a long time. Mostly not only to just celebrate Pride Month, because it's the end of Pride Month, but also to celebrate my insatiable love of Evanescence in every conceivable way. So I am joined by my dear friend, EvanescenceFanatic. How are you?
I am doing very wonderful. I'm doing so good. How are you?
I am, well, other than being a hot mess, I am doing pretty good.
Yes.
I've been really looking forward to this all day. And actually, since we planned it, I've been really looking forward to this. Um, I like, I guess, well, first, let's talk a little bit about how you and I have gotten acquainted. Like, we've not met in person, which, of course, I'm sure we both hope to change one day. But we've
Right.
we met online through different Evanescence groups, and of course, we've bonded over being LGBTQ plus, which we really appreciated.
Right.
And I know we've been pretty engaged in our own respective fandom with regard to having conversations about being
hmm
LGBTQ plus, its significance, so on and so forth. Um, my first question for you is
Okay.
how did you get how did you become interested in Evanescence? Like, tell me your story with regard to you
I
becoming
guess
a
it
fan.
really I guess it really wasn't much of a story. I guess just like everybody, but and like just being a teenager or anything like that. I was a tiny child. Like I was totally little. This is back in kindergarten. And I would just remember riding to school every day, listening to the radio, and for some reason they would be on the radio every single day. And tiny me would just be obsessed with them. And I didn't, think about it any more than growing up being in middle school. One of my mom's friends had Anywhere But Home, the DVD. And I remember watching the Bring Me to Life video, and I was like, oh my God, she's beautiful. Two, is this that song that I used to always hear? And I immediately like fell in love back then because everything else I would hear, it just like did not match up to Evanescence. Like it wasn't that, and everyone told me how obsessed I was back then, and I never really thought about it too much because even though I was overly obsessed as a kid, I still am. And call it a phase if you want, but I'm still in it.
Isn't it funny how many times both of us have probably been told it's just a phase for a variety of different things in our lives?
Right.
I've also been told that
Oh
with
yeah.
regard to my love of Evanescence, and um, I got
Right.
into Evanescence when I was in high school, which is kind of a terrifying thought.
hmm
I was in high school when Evanescence came out, and I remember back then, like I knew I was gay, like I knew that I was different. I wasn't out at that point, but like something
Right.
really drew me to Evanescence. Like I listened to, what was the first song I listened to? I think Going Under was my first song that I heard. Um,
hmm
and then I kind of like started delving into like the rest of their songs, and of course I fell in love with Bring Me to Life and My Immortal and the rest of the
Right.
Fallen album. And it just like it kind of validated my feeling of being the other, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think that's why back like in 2003, like Evanescence kind of became my escape as an angsty
Right.
super gay teenager. And
Yeah.
of course I wanted to be Amy Lee, like in my
Everybody did.
I know,
Come
in my
on.
brain, like I was like in my bedroom with make believe. I was like, I would wear socks on my arms to pretend that I had
Yeah.
arm
Oh my
warmers,
God. hmm
and I'd be doing my little performance. It was now looking back on it, it was really cheesy, but I would gladly
Well,
do it nowadays as well.
right. I know.
So, like obviously, we are still very much Evanescence fans. How would you
Right.
describe that your love, like, how has your love of them grown since then? That's my big question.
I think, okay, as cheesy as it sounds, as far as it growing on me and still, you know, them being one of my favorite bands, I think it's one of those things where I have found like a home in them because of how much they have helped me over the years, finding that safe spot in them and knowing that all of their music and interviews and many things that they've helped all of us through. I think it's just one of those comfort things that like I've always, fallen back on and always listening to them and knowing that no matter what, we will always have a home there. And I think that's very comforting. And I think that's one of the many things that I've grown onto them still.
Oh my gosh, that's a phenomenal answer to that question.
Hmm.
I really relate with that. Um, I think a lot of it comes back down to just like that familiarity,
Right,
and like I do have days where I'm like very nostalgic
right,
um, for like listening to that older music, but I'm also kind of re-experiencing that with their newer music too. It's
right,
reminding me that that home has always been there, right?
right.
And it brings comfort. And of course,
Yeah,
we're going to be spending a hefty portion of this stream talking about the bitter truth, of course, but
right.
because we got to. But so like when it comes to being in the LGBTQ plus community
Mhm.
specifically, do you think that do you think that Evanescence provided you a safe harbor with regard to that as well, or just in general being different? What do you think?
Definitely in general, but as a person, as an individual being a part of the LGBT community, listening to Evanescence always, I was always taught to be unapologetically me. So if I ever questioned how I felt about myself or other people, it was just, okay, well, no matter what, you still deserve to be happy. So just be yourself and love who you want. And even though, like, you always hear things just in society, how wrong it is, um, having them and being a part of the LGBT community, it feels safe. Um, and they helped me with that because they just taught all of us to just love. Love is just a big word. It doesn't mean, it doesn't have to have such this, sexual meaning to anything, but just love. And that's what I like about being in the LGBT community and having them because it makes me feel like I'm not ashamed to love who I want or to like show my pride anymore and just be shamelessly be who we are. So,
Yeah, I love that. I like and same here with regard to that. And like truthfully, like a lot of the themes in Evanescence's music, especially back then when Fallen was out and the Open
mhm,
Door came out, like I feel like it gave me permission to experience, like to feel anger and to know that being angry or being sad or being apathetic sometimes,
right,
I didn't need to be ashamed to feel those things because it's about the
right,
human experience, right?
right. And I think that was very important because I was always taught growing up that, oh, well, you're not supposed to cry or show emotion, like type of thing. And it was one of those things where just now, like I am just now learning to know that it's okay to express myself in a manner like that, even if it's angry or any other way like that. And I agree with you. And I didn't even think, about that type of expressing.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with like I was of course introduced to Evanescence before I was out. Like believe me, I knew that I
Right.
was super gay. Like I knew it deep down, but I didn't, really
Right.
I didn't admit it necessarily.
Right.
But like obviously like keeping all of that in and internalizing all of that, I really like I felt a lot of like anger toward myself, a
Right.
lot of kind of like resentment about the world around me. and a lot of the music kind of gave me a healthy outlet in order to at least consider those emotions without completely internalizing them, at my own expense. So, like I really I think that Evanescence really helped my emotional development, as odd as that might
Right.
sound, but it really allowed me to express myself in a safe way.
Right.
And it, of course, it taught me that these feelings that everybody around me is telling me, oh, you're bad for feeling these things, like
Right.
they taught me that that wasn't the case, Evanescence did, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Um, so now that we've talked about our histories a little bit, in connection with the band specifically, so like the weird thing that I never thought of doing until this year when Pride Month happened is I actually put together a Pride playlist, um, like with different Evanescence songs. So I went through their discography and I was like, like what songs over the years have spoken to me and my little gay heart, my little gay gothy heart. Um,
Right.
and of course, like I picked some classics, but I also incorporated a lot of their like newer music as well.
Right.
And I really looked at The Bitter Truth, their new album, and took a lot of inspiration from it because for me, thematically, The Bitter Truth is, and Amy Lee has mentioned this in interviews as well, that The Bitter Truth is about those first steps that we take after experiencing some sort of trauma, like that survival,
Right.
like the point where we decide that we are going to keep on going.
Right.
And like the whole past few months since it came out in March, I've been listening to it and thinking about it, and in my own experiences, still coming to terms with some things. Like a lot of those songs really spoke to me. So, just to kind of overview some of the songs that I chose to include in the Pride playlist, which, by the way, I will link in the description section after this stream. But if you even just search Evanescence Pride playlist, you should be able to find it on YouTube. I chose to include songs like The Artifact, The Turn, which is the first track on The Bitter Truth, Broken Pieces Shine. Let me think of the other ones that I included from The Bitter Truth. I included Use My Voice. That would, like, obviously I had to include that one. And I included Part of Me and Blind Belief. I believe those were the songs that I chose to include from that album. And I particularly, like, if I were, and this is going to be another question that I ask later on, but I'm going to kind of preliminarily answer it now. But my favorite song right now from The Bitter Truth has been Part of Me, uh, because like of the lyric in it that essentially states that we are not our survival. Like we don't necessarily have to be solely defined by that. Like that really
Right.
spoke to me. So, um, like I know you've had a chance to probably look at the Evanescence Pride playlist. Are there like any songs that I mentioned that you really connect with, or any songs that I may not have mentioned that you really identify with? That's been something that's been very, empowering for you over the past few years.
I'm not sure if you've included it or not. It's not a part of the Bitter Truth, but Lost in Paradise has always hold a very special place in my heart, um, from the self-titled album, because it was always one of those songs where it was such a reassurance to me that things will eventually get better and we won't feel this pain anymore. Um, Especially dealing with those thoughts of, oh, well, I feel this way, but is it normal to feel this way about my sexuality and those types of things that I never knew. I was still young, so I had no idea what I was even thinking, if it was right, if it was wrong. And always listening to that song has always been a comfort song. It's been one of many Evanescence comfort songs for me. But as far as being a part of the Pride playlist, I think that's one that speaks to me a lot.
I did not include that one, and now I'm thinking, I'm like, Donnie, what the hell? You should have included that one. Um, and well, because like looking back on Lost in Paradise, like it, like I, in a way, it's kind of been one of my escape songs as well. I love me a good ballad, and every Evanescence
Yeah,
ballad is probably like I like those songs almost as much as the headbanging songs too.
right,
Um, but Lost in Paradise does seem like that kind of escapist type of theme, you know, which I
right.
strongly appreciate. Another one that I chose to include on the Pride playlist is a personal favorite of mine from the Open Door, the song "Good Enough," and
Mhm.
that song has always been very significant to me, but it's kind of really grown in significance over the past few years because, like, I kind of went through this very long denial period in my life where I believed that I had self acceptance, but I really didn't. And
Right.
Good Enough was that first Evanescence song that I was introduced to that really kind of reflected on self worth a lot and how sometimes we draw people into our lives that see our self worth before we end up seeing our self worth. Um, so that song is definitely one that I included, and I will always brag about that song. If anybody ever asks me what my favorite Evanescence song is, that's usually my immediate go-to for that
Mhm.
specific reason. So, what other songs would you argue have shaped you over your lifetime from this band specifically? We're gonna nerd out big time.
I have no idea. There's so many to choose from. I've obviously Lost in Paradise, the entire Bit of Truth album, but that's obvious. I like to think What You Want to also from the self-titled album because it was always one of those things that helped me as far as being in the LGBT community. Um, just always knowing, hey, I feel like this, I'm growing up, you know, are people going to look at me the same as I used to be as a child, even though I haven't changed, obviously, of just coming to terms to being who I am, but also not trying to lose myself while also trying to fight those demons and the struggles that we used to face and are still facing. So that song also has helped me a lot and to shape me into who I am today when it comes to that.
That's an excellent selection. I think I also did include I think I did include it on the Pride playlist as well. And like for me, that song, I think of it as like the perfect coming out song in a way
Yeah.
because it's kind of building on from what you were saying. It's like this reintroduction and
Right.
like kind of looking back on that era of the self-titled album. Like I thought that that was a phenomenal like comeback song, right? Like I remember the hype way back in 2011. It's terrifying to think it was 2011. Oh my goodness. Um, but
Right.
like yeah, like it's kind of just like this reminder of like, hey, this is me, and I am unapologetically presenting to you that this is me, you know. So
Right.
I think that for me that's why that song was so empowering as well. So now before we
Yeah.
get too far ahead, I do want to acknowledge who's in the chat. So we had Leo here. We've had Rogue Agent Killer Rodan, who says that um, one of their favorite songs is "Show Yourself" from Frozen 2, and that does count. Like if you have other songs from like other like movies or groups or musicians that really speak to you, please share them in the comments. Like I would greatly appreciate that. But yeah, so I like one other one that I really want to reflect on that really just kind of empowers me. Like every time I listen to it, I'm like revved up and ready to go. I am super obsessed with Use My Voice from The Bitter Truth. And it's interesting because
Yeah.
I know that song for some people like it's Evanescence's first significant, you know, head dive into a more political type of theme, and I know that that sometimes makes people
Right.
uncomfortable. And the truth
Right.
is, from the LGBTQ plus perspective, we have no choice but to be involved in the politics of things because a lot of those
Right.
politics have the potential of negatively affecting us in ways
Yeah.
may not want to admit, right? So
Right.
personally, seeing one of my favorite musical groups take on a message as important as like, well, don't you dare speak for me, like it is my voice and
Right.
I have every right to use my voice for some sort of change. Like being able to see
Right.
them convey that message was unbelievably empowering. And I very much think of it as also being an LGBTQ plus anthem because it spoke to what we've been going through for like the past 4 years because many of
Yeah.
us in the community have felt a lot of threat over the past 4 years specifically. So being able to have that anthem was kind of like a bright spot last year, especially when things were looking so
Right.
unbelievably dismal. What are your impressions of Use My Voice and the music video?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And a lot of people didn't like it because they were bringing politics into it. But the way that I look at it, society put everybody in this pretty bubble to basically go with the flow. And they want everything to be calm. They want people to just listen to something and move on. They don't want drama involved with it. And the one thing about them is that they are going to use their voice for what's right and what they believe in. And I think that we need more of that, especially for people in the LGBTQ community, because there are so many people out there who can't use their voice and aren't safe to use their voice. And that's why it's such a powerful song, politically or not, because a lot of people don't have that. And I really think we do need more of that.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I mean if we look at Evanescence, like they've been around for almost 2 decades now, at least like in
Yeah.
like mainstream music, right?
Right.
And I think and I remember hearing Amy Lee talk about this in interviews, like the band itself has gotten to a point where they realize that they have a very large platform and a huge social following with a very diverse fan base, right? A fan base who has many different marginalized communities who've been
Mhm.
threatened or who have felt very unsafe over the past 4 years or even more.
Yeah.
So, like, I think they made the right decision in going the political route
Yeah.
because um, like it's using their platform to convey a message that you're not alone, like we are here with you and we're going to do what we can to help support your
Right.
voice and your perspective. And it was just so comforting and meaningful to me, and I strongly appreciate it. And I in fact I hope that we get more political themed Evanescence music in the future. I'm sure I'm going to get some hate comments for that, and if I do, I welcome them. Because if you are privileged enough to have to not worry about politics, then I think that you should
Right.
definitely consider the groups of people who do have to worry about politics, um,
Right.
because we don't have the luxury of just being super laissez-faire about that type of thing. Um, I'm getting sassy now. Here we
Right.
go. So, um, okay, so we're in bitter truth mode now, since we've just kind of transitioned into talking about the bitter truth. What is your current favorite song from the bitter truth, and why? I say current because mine keeps fluctuating every day.
Right. Right. And same here. But I think, as cliche as it sounds, it Broken Piece of Shine right now is like my all-time favorite song for like many reasons. I guess for me, I just felt broken for so long for many reasons. And I'm now at a turning point that I feel like I can finally try to heal from all of that trauma, all of that. And of course, survival hurts. What you do, healing hurts. Trying to move on to better yourself, that hurts. but it's also one of those things that it's like a reminder to like, hey, don't give up, even though it's still pretty hard. Um, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I let all of my broken pieces shine, but even though that I'm letting that completely out, I have to learn to also embrace myself in the process because of everything. And I that's just one of my favorite songs right now on that album, and it's just so powerful, especially right now for Pride Month. And I've just been listening to that song so much. It's just chef's kiss.
Yeah, I love that. And, like, oh my God, I cannot get over the transition between Artifact the Turn and Broken Pieces Shine. Like, it is musical gold. Like, when I first heard that, like, I don't know if I cried or peed my pants or both, all of the above probably. But I just remember thinking, like, this is that moment where we decide to pick ourselves up. Like, it's difficult. It sounds really
Right.
loud, it's booming, but it's beautiful at the same time, right? So, yeah, like Broken Pieces Shine,
Yes.
agree 100%. Um, okay, so
Hmm.
today specifically, my favorite, I would say I've been kind of fluctuating between Far From Heaven and Part of Me. Today specifically, Part of Me I think is one of my favorites. Um, I mean, I mentioned the message of the song, right? The fact that, like we have to go through survival, but we don't necessarily have to let survival define us, right? Or we are not just our
Right.
survival. Like that's one main reason why I love that song. But to me, that song is a love letter to Evanescence fans specifically, because I mean the song like at certain points tells us fans that we are part of them, and I think that
Right.
like having that message is so unbelievably empowering because I feel like personally, I feel more connected to the band than I ever used to, especially with how
Hmm.
engaging they've been on social media and how we've been able to kind of like see like more intimate aspects of their lives through the different music
Yeah.
videos that have been released. I like I feel like we are all a family of sorts and that we're all
Yeah.
surviving this together. And to me, that makes that survival just as wholesome as it was before, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes, it makes completely sense because I just like you, more than ever, I feel more close to them. I feel like I have met more people online in the fandom, yourself included, and I feel more like a family and I feel not so alone as I used to, and it feels wonderful.
I'm glad that you mentioned the fandom aspect of it too, because I also feel that connection.
Hmm.
Um, I've kind of been involved in the Evanescence fandom for a long time, but I didn't really start like actively participating until like maybe a year. Well, when Synthesis came out, that's when I really
Yeah.
started like engaging a lot online. And since then, like I've kind of had this discovery that while like the Evanescence fandom is way bigger than we think, and it's way more diverse than we believe, and I have found a lot of comfort in that. And I've also noticed that like allies in this fandom are very like supportive too,
Yeah.
which is very meaningful. I have encountered and I'm sure that this might be not the experience for other people. So this is my privilege, but I've not encountered a lot of like LGBTQ plus phobias. So like thankfully
Right.
I've not been the recipient of any hate. But
Right.
well until they see me, say that I think more Evanescence music should be political, but
Right. Right. And I'm just like you, except well, unlike you, I've had certain people in the Evanescence fandom. I have received hate, which I don't know why. And thinking about it, it's one of those things where it's like, well, are you an Evanescence fan? Like, come on. But I've met so many wonderful people in the fandom, and that's how I've met my fiance. We both love Evanescence, and now we're engaged. So it's one of those really beautiful things that have been so grateful to be a part of. And having her in my life is one of those lifelong things that I get to hold very close to me because we have met through Evanescence.
You two are so precious, by the way. Like like, I love that you two bond over the band, especially because, um, like in a way, from my observation, like you both have survived and found empowerment, not only in each other but from the music as well.
Right.
So, being able to see that, and being able to find wholesomeness out of how fearless you both are in expressing that, like that's so amazing. That really makes me happy. And if I ever see anybody in the Evanescence fandom being disrespectful to either of you, they better hope that I don't see, because I'm not putting up
Yeah.
with that business.
Right.
But like, I mean, like I've experienced like phobias in like a lot of other fandoms, but
Right.
like I'm sure like every other fandom, the Evanescence fandom has its fair share of like gatekeepy people who can be very
Right.
toxic in a variety. Because I know I like on Twitter, especially, like I've seen some
Oh God.
ridiculousness on Twitter. Don't
Yeah.
even get me started on that. So, but but like again, like it comes back down to who we surround ourselves with too.
Yeah.
Like I know like I've had some Evanescence fans get a little uncomfortable with how loudmouthed I am about politics, like political stuff.
Right.
Um, but I've also found that I've been able to like weed those people out and surround myself with people like you, for example. Like
Right.
we're all like very empowering of one another with regard to, being vocal about those types of things. So,
Right. That's the one thing I
um,
never really understood about, speaking out about anything really. But like, okay, if you don't like it, then I mean, fine, understandable. But like, do people genuinely expect us to be quiet about things that like have an effect on us or something? I never really understood that, even though it is something big and, too much negativity, blah, blah, blah. But like, just like Amy said, if we don't keep talking about it, we're just going to keep drowning in it. So, like, what's the point of not speaking about it? You know what I mean?
yes, 100%. Well, I think it all comes back down to privilege too. Like, I mean, there are
Yeah,
just some groups of people who, like, I imagine it's hard to fathom why any of those things would worry us because they've never really had to deal with those things.
right,
And of course, like it's my goal to try to turn those into educational moments, because it's like, okay, yeah, like I'm glad that you've never had to worry about those things, but
right.
here are some reasons why we've had to worry about those things, and why we appreciate it when artists speak out about these types of issues, right?
Yeah,
Because like I mean, we do have some degree of social platform through our social media, right? But bands like Evanescence and like other celebrities, like they have way larger followings, and it kind of becomes some degree of social responsibility to use those followings for a
yeah,
good cause, right? So, um, now I guess like thinking back on the bitter truth, because we've already talked about like the significance of Evanescence being a little bit more like political nowadays, but like I'd also like to talk about a few other themes on the album as well. So, what were like looking back on the bitter truth as a whole, what were some takeaways for you? Like what themes really stood out, other than of course like survival hurts, since we already talked about that one. Are there
right.
any other ones you can think of?
As cliche as this sounds, it's not really what's in the album, but I think the album as a whole, we're just talking about the bitter truth. So I think it's one of those. I think this is why it's a very special album, especially for Pride Month, because it's literally a coming out album. It's a freeing album. It's coming out of your shell to stand up for yourself. It's all of these things. It's what it is. It's the bitter truth, and it's very powerful. And throughout all of it, like you said, survival hurts. Being more than my survival and not giving up. It's stated very directly within the album, and it has so many concepts within the album. Um, And what I love about it is that even though past albums have helped us for many reasons, especially when it comes to mental health, I think this album alone has a lot to do with mental health awareness. And that's very special to me and for you and for many others I know. But there's not one specific thing that I can pinpoint about the album. It's just the entire album itself and the bitter truth and speaking
Mm.
out on it. And I think that's why it's very special to me. It's because for me, I take it on as a coming out album, whether it's about yourself or just growing as a person. And that to me, that's what I take away from it.
I like that. It's a coming out album. Like, I could not agree more. And I like going back to the title, like what you were talking about, the bitter truth. Like, I mean, the album seems so interwoven with layers, but all of those layers just kind of connect back to, like you were saying, the bitter truth, right? So,
Right,
the fact that sometimes we have to come out or confront something or kind of have like this moment of self acceptance or self realization, it can feel very intimidating. It can be difficult. It can be painful,
right,
vulnerable, but we have to do it, right? Like the moment we
right,
finally do it, that's when the bitter truth happens. That's when that turning point happens where we're able to take that pain that we've gone through and turn it into some form of power, right? And I
right.
feel like the bitter truth is like a representation of that healing process,
Same.
which
And I agree with you.
yeah, yeah. And I really like, I just think that that's really empowering. Another song or theme that I really wanted to talk a little bit about is the final song on the album, Blind Belief. And well, first of all, like I think that that song was the best way to end the entire album. um
Right, I agree.
like just the message of love overall, like at the end of the day, that's what's going to save us, right? The
Right.
realization that it's our love of one another, our genuine human caring of one another, that's going to break down all the systems and all the things that are trying to silence us or oppress us, right?
Mhm.
So I really value that as a theme, especially. So now, another favorite part of the album for me, I love how sassy the album is. I'm
Yes.
always here for sassy Evanescence. The songs, yeah, right, specifically, and Take Cover, which of course
Yes.
are older songs that finally made an album, which we really
I
appreciate.
know.
I I would say Better Without You also was a very sassy song, but like I like I really think that those the themes in those songs about like self-affirming, like I exist and you can't like ignore me, like I'm here, so
Right.
get over it, like I have never
Right.
lost my crown, right? I
Right.
love it. Like I think that we like it kind of models for us kind of like that thought process that we should try to condition ourselves into thinking
Mhm.
when we are confronted with people who are always trying to extinguish us, you know? So,
Right. And I
you
think
know,
growing up with all of the albums, it's like, okay, there was always that part of them that, like, yes, they've always expressed themselves and they've acknowledged many situations about many things, no matter what it was. But I think something about the bitter truth was that I genuinely feel like this is one of their first albums that I felt like they were being completely genuine with everything that like they've been trying to do and say and portray. And just like you said, it was a very sassy album. And a lot of the songs that like she would sing, I would just sit there and be like, yes, like this is what we've all been waiting for, was just for her to snap, really. Because you know how she's always talked about it, everything has been super dark. And yes, this album is very dark, but it's also very like just snappy and in your face, like, hey, this is what it is now, this is what's gonna happen, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. Well, and I think it is a necessary darkness. Like this album
Yes,
needs to be dark because I think we kind of as a society are in denial when it comes to healing, and we assume that healing is
right.
sunshine and rainbows, and it's not. Like
Yes,
healing is a dark process, and it can
yes.
be painful. That's the bitter truth of it, right?
That is, and that's what I was going to say too earlier. When it comes to trauma in this album, and I've had this conversation with quite a few people over the last couple of weeks, actually. You know, you get out of a toxic situation and you try to move on with yourself, and most people would think, okay, well, you know, you're out of your toxic situation now. You should be happy. You should feel better. You should be okay now. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. It takes so much time just to heal from the trauma, trying to get through that trauma and still trying to break from unhealthy coping mechanisms. And that's what not a lot of people realize how dark that still is. Like, yes, we're trying to heal, but the healing process isn't going to be linear. And we're only going up from here, yes, but it's not as easy. It's not all sunshine and rainbows like people really make it out to be.
Right. And I mean, like you were mentioning, the healing process is not linear. Like I know a lot of people get really down on themselves. Like if they think that they've resolved something, they might end up
Right.
revisiting something, right? And I'm trying to remember, was it yesterday? I think Amy Lee did an interview with a psychologist. I'm trying to remember what his name was. I think Dr. Mike. I think that's what his name was. But she mentioned in the interview that because she was like reflecting on like the loss of her siblings, right? And the fact that like we don't really completely get over loss, right? Like we
Right.
have to remain vigilant about our healing from it, but like we don't linger on like those deaths or those losses. We also like part of the healing process is celebrating their existence, their
Right.
lives, and like it really made me think about how as a band, like okay, so like I'm almost 33 years old, so like I've been an Evanescence fan for a million years, it seems like. And like in some ways, like I feel like the band itself has kind of grown as I've grown. And it makes me think about like back in 2003, like I was being really sad and upset and angsty over like lost love or being lonely. And while those themes may still be present in Evanescence music, like I feel like the bitter truth especially has kind of given us a more three-dimensional perspective on how one grows with
Right.
trauma, with loss, and how we continue to be vigilant with coping with those things
Right.
as we get older. So um, that I think that's another reason why I really appreciate the bitter truth a lot. Is like I
Yeah.
feel like it's been a reflection of that growth over the years too.
Right. And I'm almost 22. I'm a lot younger than you are. And I had no business crying to my immortal. Okay, I had no business. But, you know, growing up and still having them basically like a family almost, and growing up with them was very special. And I never would have thought just how much of an impact they would have had. But having the bitter truth was like reflecting on all of those years that I did grow up with them. And it's like, wow, you know, this is special for not only us, but I also feel like for Amy, because I feel like over the years she's been craving to finally say what she wants to say and to tell it and be there for everybody the way that she's always wanted to.
Right, like she doesn't have like anybody holding her back, which I
Right,
think is very empowering. And we know that history, like that long
right,
history. Um, so like in many ways, like I think as both you and I have grown as well, like we've kind of discovered that we don't have time for people holding us back either. Like
right.
we are moving forward, we're becoming who we're meant to become, right? So like I really think it's interesting because you are a Gen Zer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I just think it's really interesting looking at a millennial perspective on Evanescence
Right.
and a Gen Zer's perspective on Evanescence because like I feel like both of us are having very similar takeaways um to their music. I mean, it just occurred at different times, right? So
Right.
um when you were getting in like when you were being introduced to Evanescence when you were younger, like were there other people around you experiencing that at the same time? Were other people familiar with Evanescence, or was it kind of like a
Well,
peripheral
I both I grew up on a lot of music like Evanescence. So it wasn't anything unusual for me to experience. My dad grew up on a lot of music very similar to them, and he still plays music. He still plays Evanescence songs and things like that. It wasn't like one of those, oh well, she's experienced this weird thing. I grew up with them. My family liked them. Um, but when I first got into them, it was just me, and it was such a really odd experience because it was almost so livid, and my little mind couldn't wrap my head around what I was experiencing at the time. And being grateful enough to hold on to that for so long, I am so grateful because I have experienced so many things because of it.
That's awesome. I my big goal in life is to get people into Evanescence. So I've known, so there's like a helicopter going by and it's obnoxious right now. So like most of the people in my life, at least like fellow millennials, of course, are familiar with like "Bring Me to Life," right? They're like, "Oh yeah, that
Right.
"Wake Me Up Inside" song," and I'm like, "No, it's
Right.
"Bring Me to Life," like not "Wake Me Up Inside." But I'm always trying to coax those people and be like, listen to this by them. Listen to this album. Like try the bitter truth. Like you won't be disappointed. And I've been like successfully like getting other people obsessed with them and it just makes me feel
That's
so
the
good.
same thing like with me. And it was so funny you said that because I think it was middle school and I had this one friend. She was so cute. She was always so sweet. She always tried her hardest to like make me happy. And it was adorable. And I remember one day I met her in the hallway. She's like, guess what? Guess what? I was like, what? She goes, I listened to my first Evanescence song. And I was like, that's so cute. I was like, which one? She goes, I don't know. I think the song is called All of Me. I was like, oh, okay. So you listened to my Immortal. And she goes, yeah, I think so. But it was so good. And it was such a heartwarming moment for me. And I still remember that moment in middle school showing somebody the band for the first time and they fell in love with it. I was like, yes.
Like, oh, isn't that it's such a wonderful feeling. And I've noticed that the other people in my life who tend to prefer like theatrical things and like dramatic things, like sweeping orchestral arrangements and operatic voice stuff with like a very solid beat to it. They typically really are drawn to Evanescence as well.
Right.
And I really think that like because people are always saying like, well, rock music like this is dead, like it was early to mid 2000s, and I really couldn't disagree more with that because like the music industry and the consumers of music are largely shaped by the powers within the music industry kind of like navigating things and,
Right.
and dictating things. So like this music is still out there and it still has the potential of reaching people. You just have to know where to go
Right.
and who to surround yourself um, when it comes to that. So um, I guess okay, so like on to our final few discussion questions. So um, why do you think Evanescence as a band has thrived for actually over 20 years when you think about it? What makes this band stand out from other bands and other musical acts, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think, and Amy has said this multiple times before, but I think the patience and waiting for something really special to come along, quality over quantity. the famous soon for it all. Everyone wants to know, well, why are they, waiting so long to make music? I mean, I don't know about you, but every time that they've waited and made music, it has been absolutely incredible. And, I think they've just thrived so much because they wait until, okay, this is what we truly want. This is what we want to actually say. And this is what we're going to do. And a lot of musicians out there, they make albums like every other year. And it's like, don't get me wrong, they're pretty good, but it's just like, I have never really met or heard of a band quite like Evanescence who wait for a certain amount of time and then come out with something absolutely incredible
Mm-hmm.
lyrically and musically.
100% agree with that. I like I've seen so many artists get burnt out, you know, and
Yeah,
like I really think that Amy and the rest of the band are very conscious of their mental health and their
yeah,
creativity output. And I think they realize that, like if in order to optimally create, have family time, be in a good mental place, like one has to pace themselves. Like I there are some fans I know who are like, "Oh my god, we've had to wait 10 years." And I guess what frustrates me is that when people make that statement, they don't think about the fact that the band has done stuff in the past 10 years. Like people forget that Synthesis was a huge tour. Like
right,
not to mention an album that had like new songs on it too, with
right,
original rework or reworkings of original songs.
yeah,
And not to mention they released Lost Whispers. They like Amy Lee did a children's album, like musical scores, solo things. Like it's not like we've not had anything to consume at all
right,
whatsoever.
exactly.
So like whenever I see fans like complain about that, I'm just like, are you just being dramatic, or like are you really considering this? Um so like I'm just like I'll wait another 10 years if I have to. Like if
Right,
like if they feel that it takes that amount of time and they want to wait that amount of time, like go for it. Go. I'll
right,
always be a fan. Like nothing will change that.
right.
So um so the other thing that I wanted to ask um, would be like, and we've kind of talked about this, like as an LGBTQ plus person who's been out and we both have found some degree of self acceptance, right? Like, why do you always feel yourself being drawn back to Evanescence?
I think it's just that self, and we talked about that earlier. I think it's just that self of comfort, knowing that it's basically just like a family. Because imagine, a family member or a friend that you've always grown up with and they've always been there for you and helped you through all of that. And you always just, without even thinking, you just always go back to it because that's just your comfort place and you're always going to, support them and help them and do whatever you can to make them happy because that's, they've helped you through everything. And it's one of those things that as an LGBTQ person, not only do I enjoy the music helps me through a lot. It's a distraction through a lot in my life. And it's just a safe place for me. That's a safe haven for me. That's just the main thing that I can really think that, well, why do I always draw them back to them? It's that phase that I can't get out of.
Same here. I like, I think that growing as the band has grown
Right.
has helped me discover new things about myself and find
Right.
new modes of self-acceptance. Like as a creator myself, as a writer, like I find that, because I mean I just released a collection of poems, and that collection, like especially when Amy Lee started describing the bitter truth as being like those first steps we take, in order to heal. Like I was like, well, that's exactly how I felt while I was writing my book. Like mind blown right now. Like, oh my goodness. So like knowing that I can also share in that like creative output and be able to experience in my own way that creative process like is has been very meaningful for me. So
Yeah. And I
um
was going to say, too, adding on to that, when you were saying, it has helped you, even learn things about yourself and everything like that. The one thing I never really understood is, okay, well, growing up with this type of band and having them always be there, most people would think that, well, okay, well, you've been listening to this same group, you've always been taking a liking to them, and you haven't really changed that much. But in reality, like you said, it's one of those things that they've helped me grow. If anything, they've helped me branch out to be more things than one that I'm not.
I love that. Yes, 100%. Mm. So if you were to like this is our final question, of course. If you were to address the band about your identity and how Evanescence has helped shape you, what would you tell them? That's a big question.
I think this also plays on earlier. It's a very good question. Um, like I said earlier, they've just helped me to love unconditionally, regardless of any situation. And I see people as being human beings. I'm a pansexual person who's a human being who loves unconditionally. I open my arms to people who need a hug, and I use my voice for people who can't, just like they've done for us. It's one of those pay it forward mental things, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, I've been taught to do those things because a lot of people can't do that. And because they can't, people who are in, you know, our shoes, they don't think they're still valid. People who are in the closet, they still think that they're not valid or a part of the LGBT community. And they are. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I put myself out there because growing up, I grew up in a society where it was wrong to do that. Don't put yourself out there for many reasons. And I wanted to break free from that. And that's exactly what I did. And they've helped me with that. And I'm so glad that they did because I feel better at helping people, inspiring people, doing what we're doing right now. I mean, putting myself out there and doing what I was told not to do. Sometimes it's okay to break free from what you've always known, and that's really important.
Oh, I love that. That like that was the perfect answer. And for me, like and I always like whenever I'm talking about Evanescence to people, I always mention the fact that Evanescence helped keep me alive in 2003 and they're helping keep me alive in 2021. And I really think that
Yeah,
a lot of Evanescence fans can relate with the fact that the band and the music has been another thing for us to hold on to that's meaningful, right? And and I would argue that being that we discovered that ourselves, like we can help other people also hold on and to continue understanding their worth and their
right,
significance in this world, right? And to not be discouraged about darkness they may
right,
have or by their sadness or by their anger because all of that's part of the human experience and we're all in this together. Like that's really what I would
right,
how I would answer that question as well. So
right. And
so I'll go ahead.
I do want to add on to that. I've noticed that a lot of Evanescence fans, oh, well, they saved my life. I feel like, as much of a general statement as that is, it's very true in many ways, and it's just special.
Right. Like I will never forget. So I met the band in Chicago when they were on their synthesis tour. My first time meeting the band, mind you.
Aw.
And
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to tell. I think Jen and Amy heard me because I was closest to them. But I like told Amy I was like, "You've kept me alive. Like, thank you so much." And like afterward, like because we stayed after to meet them, like by the buses and stuff. Like she like came up and gave
Right.
me a hug and like said something to me about like just something very self-affirming, and I was just like, I cried afterward. But like, just like having that validation was so unbelievably significant, and knowing that we can all connect with each other, like even the band, because like we feel like family, right? Being able to connect with them on that wavelength, the fact that
Right.
we're all surviving, that we've all experienced trauma, and that we should unapologetically find solace in each other. Like, I think that's so significant. That's very validating. So okay, everyone. So I think that Evanescence Fanatic might be having some internet issues as well. So I am going to bid adieu. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you to Evanescence Fanatic for joining me this evening as well. Hopefully, the next stream that we do will not be plagued with as many technical problems. Most of them were on my end, so I apologize for those. I love you all, and you have a good rest of your day. Bye.